You ever been in one of those arguments? You know the one. You've got all the facts, all the charts, all the data on your side, and the other person just won't budge. It's like you're speaking two different languages. Well, what if the problem isn't the facts? What if the real issue is that we've totally misunderstood what stories are actually for? All right, let's get into it.
See, most of us think of a narrative as a story designed to persuade you of something. That's the common view. But there's a much more powerful way to look at this. The structural view says that narratives aren't just trying to change your beliefs. They're actually changing the shape of your mind. They literally constrain what you're capable of thinking.
And this is the absolute heart of what we're exploring today. Narratives aren't persuasion tools, they're architectural tools. They don't just put new information into the container of your mind, they fundamentally rebuild the container itself.
Now, there's a name for this way of thinking. It's called structural cognition. It's all about looking past the content of a story, what it's about, and instead analyzing it like a piece of machinery designed to rewire how you think. It's a huge shift from focusing on meaning to focusing on function.
So why do our brains even need these structures in the first place? Well, the one-word answer is pressure. When life gets too complex, too overwhelming, too uncertain, our minds start screaming for stability. And you know what the fastest route to stability is? A simple story.
Just think about it for a second. That time you felt completely swamped with information, or you had no idea what was going to happen next. What did you reach for? My guess is it was a simple, clear explanation. Maybe even a story with a clear good guy and a bad guy. Turns out there's a deep-seated neurological reason we do that.
You see, when your brain is under pressure, its entire game plan changes. Ambiguity, which is fine when we're relaxed, suddenly becomes exhausting. Complexity stops feeling interesting and starts feeling dangerous. Your brain gets overloaded, and its one and only prime directive becomes, find a stable pattern, now.
And this brings us to the most critical insight of all. When our minds are under that kind of cognitive load, we don't pick a story because it's the most factually accurate. We pick it because it's the most coherent. It's the one that holds together and quiets the chaos in our heads. Stability trumps accuracy, every single time.
Okay, so how does this actually happen? How does a simple story manage to get its hooks so deep into our thinking that nothing can shake it loose? Well, it happens through two really powerful mechanisms that basically lock it in place. Let's break them down.
So the first one is called topological narrowing. Sounds fancy, I know, but the idea is pretty simple. Imagine your mind is like a wide-open, flat desert. A really powerful narrative comes along and boom, it carves a Grand Canyon right through the middle. Now, thinking along that path is easy. It's fast, it's downhill. But trying to think any other way, you'd have to climb out of a canyon first. So any new information you get just gets funneled right down that same familiar channel.
But the second mechanism, man, this one is even stronger. It's called identity compression. This is where a story stops being something you hear and becomes part of who you are. The narrative defines an us and a them, and suddenly your brain's main job isn't to be accurate anymore. Its job is to belong. Protecting the narrative now feels exactly the same as protecting yourself. And it's so important to get this. This isn't a bug in our mental software. It's a feature. When our identity gets fused to a story, our brain is just engaging in self-preservation. It's doing what it has to do to protect our sense of a coherent self from shattering into a million pieces. So now that we have these concepts, we can start to understand some of the most frustrating things about the world, right? Like why political polarization feels like an uncrossable divide, and why just throwing facts at people almost never, ever works.
We tend to look at polarization as this big social or moral failure. But if you look at it structurally, it's actually a stabilization strategy. In a world with way too much information, an us versus them story is simple. It dramatically cuts down the cognitive load. You lose all the nuance, sure, but what you gain is coherence. It's a trade-off.
And that's why when we're trying to change someone's mind, we always think the same thing. I just need a better fact, or maybe if I explain this chart one more time. We just keep throwing more and more data at the wall, hoping something will finally stick.
But we're missing the point entirely. The problem was never the evidence. The real problem is that to that person, your counter-narrative feels like a wrecking ball aimed at the very foundation of their mental stability. You're not just offering information, you're threatening the entire structure that's keeping them sane. Of course their brain's going to fight you.
And this points us right to the answer. You can't use a fire hose of facts to erode a narrative. It just doesn't work. The only thing that allows a mind to relax enough to even consider a different structure is a feeling of safety.
You have to lower the cognitive load and the identity threat. Only then can the walls of that canyon start to come down.
This also explains something else you've probably seen, people repeating things that you suspect they don't fully believe themselves. That's because the story is acting like architectural glue. Its job is to coordinate the group and signal that you belong. Whether every single person believes every single word is almost secondary to that social function.
So all of this, it leads us to a totally different way of thinking about belief and disagreement. It means we have to stop asking the same old question we've always asked and start asking a much, much better one.
So here's the main thing to take away from all this. The next time you hear a story that sounds completely wrong or just baffling, resist the urge to just call it a lie. Instead, try seeing it as a solution, a structural solution that person's mind came up with to manage some kind of overwhelming complexity.
For literally centuries, this has been our go-to question, right? Which narrative is correct? We line them all up and treat it like a contest, where one story wins and all the others are just wrong.
But as we've seen, that's just the wrong question. It's a dead end. It completely misses the whole point of what a narrative is doing for a person. It ignores the need, and that's why it just leads to endless, frustrating conflict.
So here it is, the better question, the more powerful question. Instead of asking, is this story true, ask yourself this. What pressure, what complexity, what load in this person's world made this narrative feel absolutely necessary for their survival? When you start asking that, you stop arguing with the story and you start to understand the world.